For those of you who don't know for some odd reason what Geometry Dash is, it's a 2D platformer game that is based around music. You wouldn't say that it's a rhythm-based game because then you'd be bombarded by an army of Osu players telling you how wrong you are. Thing that makes Geometry Dash stand out the most from other games such as The Impossible Game, Geometry Jump, Geometry Pixel Dash, Geometry Cartoon Cat, Dash Till Puff is that GD, as we call it, has a creative mode. Now, what this creative mode allows players to do is artistically express themselves in the form of levels that sync to music. These can be flashy, colorful, but they can also be slow and somber. The only limit to what people can come up with is their imagination. And some of the artistically unique levels that these players and this community have come up with have honestly changed the way that independent people can create pieces of art. But we're not here to talk about those levels. We're here to talk about Captain's Voyage. Rather than jumping into our own thoughts and opinions on the level, why don't we see what the internet thinks about it? Why would we come to our own conclusion about how good the level is if we could just blindly follow what others say? Zobros thinks that this level is a pickle, which obviously has a negative connotation, meaning that he hated the level. Nitro Dash has played the level so long that they are unable to even come up with normal sounding sentences, saying things like yo, ho, ho, and making up words like rum. And last but not least, Brandon Larkin says this level is really fun. Brandon Larkin is wrong. But after looking at all these fantastic reviews from IGN, Metacritic, can the level really be that bad? Now I want to give a quick shout out to Mark for this video idea. If you have an idea for a video I could make, put it in the comments and I'll give you a shout out if I use it. And also, if you don't subscribe, I promise that the next time you play a level that you really, really want to beat, you're gonna fail at 98%. What the fuck? When you're making your own level, one of the most important things to do is make sure that your gameplay is fun, enjoyable, and unique. All of these working together can make something that the player remembers for a significant amount of time, even if the decoration is not up to par with the other levels that are being featured that day. Two of the ways that the player can make gameplay fair, which leads up to this enjoyment, is by making sure that it's extremely easy to distinguish what kills you, as well as where you're supposed to go in the level. Let's see how Captain's Voyage does with this. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at this freeze frame and tell me what on this do you think kills you. I'll give you a few seconds here. If you guessed the cannonball that came from off of the screen at 200 miles an hour with only a split second to react to it, you'd be correct. What a good use of sight readability and allowing the player to see what is going to kill you. Now let's look at this other image. Where do you think the player has to go to stay alive? Probably along this little line here where there's no bubbles. Well, if that was your original thought, you'd be wrong because those bubbles move up. So you actually have to take into account the velocity of these bubbles moving in the vertical direction to plan your entire path. In other words, you have to memorize where to go, and you cannot do it based on just looking at the level. Also, these really fast bubbles here require some of the most annoying micro adjustments that you will ever have to do. It makes sense from a creative perspective that if you were to design a level around the underwater environment, that having some of the aquatic wildlife out to get you would be a really interesting way to create hazards in that specific level. Let's see how the level does this. I bet those jellyfish kill you. They don't. I bet those sharks kill you. They don't. I bet those pufferfish kill you. They don't. Oh, nice cloud. What the? Another really important part about creating your own level and creating the gameplay for it is to make sure that there's no skips that the player can take on. A skip is essentially the player's way of getting past gameplay in an unintended way. Luckily, that doesn't happen in Captain's Voyage. At all. The last part that we'll look at is something extremely special. This has got to be the most unique gameplay that you will ever see in your life. No other level compares to the creativity and ingenuity that this singular part has displayed. Here it is. breathtaking. Now that we've looked at the gameplay of the level, the next thing to inspect is the decoration, to see how it stands up in essentially any era of GD. We're going to do this by going through the entire level so that you can finally see the full thing in one go. So the player starts off in this village where they're a pirate, and it's very hard to see what is actually going on. The color palette of this part is very bland and dark, which is not something that you'd expect for a tropical pirates themed level. Next, we make our way onto the dock, where the player now is going on to a boat. You'll see that there's a very poorly made transition that is done with a teleportal, and then there are some fish designs that look very unrealistic. And the boat itself looks very odd, and you can tell that it's a piece of artwork rather than feeling like it naturally fits into the game. Then we have a pickle. Just a pickle. It's nothing else, it's just a pickle. You enter the underwater part of the level and you see that the outline of different objects is not properly communicated to the player, and everything kind of merges, whether it's in the foreground or the background, onto the same layer. We see this jellyfish part primarily lacks decoration. It's just these singular pillars that are sticking up from the ground. The spike decoration is minimal. In fact, it has not even been attempted in this part. The next part actually is not that bad, the main issue with it being two-dimensional and not having much depth. The design here is actually one of the nicer ones, where it has kind of this old ancient temple ruin underwater rusty design, and it looks actually really good. One issue you can see is that the shark, its outer lines actually pass over top of those objects, so there is little care used in this part. This wave is completely undecorated and absolutely should be fixed. Now this is actually my favorite part of the level, arguably. It's one of the only parts that feels like it's been fully finished and feels like it should have been in such a better level. This part here is probably one of the worst parts in the level, just being green objects that have been used in so many other levels with very minimal thought put into it, and even reused this light object that was found in Sunnet's part. The boat artwork looks decent here. It's not the best, but one thing that really stands out about this part is what it was originally supposed to be. So originally, this was supposed to be a Kraken boss battle, where the player would have some unique game mode, you could think of it like a mini game, would be fighting off the tentacles of the Kraken as they move up onto the ship. This was never implemented because of lack of motivation and running out of time. If you actually remember the pickle from earlier that I mentioned, that was actually the Kraken's tentacle. So that was going to be one of the tentacles of the boss fight, and there were going to be a bunch of them going up on the side of the ship, and you'd have to shoot the cannons to make sure that the Kraken doesn't get you. As much as Sunnet is one of the better creators of the game, this is arguably one of the laziest parts I have ever seen. And then we come to the lazy end, where you are able to collect the coins based on whether or not you got the keys throughout the level. In its entirety, Captain's Voyage, for the most part, is just unfinished. It's lacking vibrancy and a dynamic of different colors, and it sticks to a two-dimensional landscape, which is so wrong. Oddly enough, this level actually went along to win one of Vibrant's top 5s for underwater themed levels. I don't know how, but I'll take it. One of the biggest problems with this level was not actually what it is, which is not very good, but what it could have been. The removal of a Kraken boss battle, the unfinished designs due to sheer laziness, all of these added together to make a level that is just so incomplete that it almost shouldn't even be published. This is my biggest complaint with the level, what it could have been. But what could it have been? In 2021, I began creating a remake and extension to Captain's Voyage. This would have made it essentially Captain's Travel, a 3-minute level with the entire song Captain's March. This is what Captain's Voyage should have been. Now, I'd like to note that all of the parts that you're seeing are still work in progresses, so they are not the finished thing. So it starts off with the same village, except this time it's a lot more colorful and a lot more vibrant. You see here, going through the houses and destroying them is a lot more decorated and interactive than it was before. Next, going on to the dock, you see that all of the designs have been redone completely. The cannonballs are moving a lot more fairly, as well as the fact that the level looks a lot more tropical than it did before. We now enter the shallows, where you see you're in a beautiful coral reef, which would be surrounded by a bunch of fish swimming everywhere in multiple different layers, and then you take a slight detour through a jellyfish cave. Here would be a similar style to the coral reef design, except there would be some broken ship parts. And this is an underground ancient ruin that has been left over and is the only finished part of this new redesign. You hop up into a ship and you start taking it over by placing your flag and just causing overall havoc. Next, we've taken the ship and we've come up onto this little island here. You can see this really nice rock formation style that I came up with. A storm starts setting in as we're venturing over the island. We make our way to this swing rope area that has a bunch of lookout towers, and we pass along them until we make it to the Skull Cavern. We travel inside the Skull Cavern looking at all the beautiful riches and jewels which have not been added yet. This is the loot that you were looking for as a pirate. And now we start to leave it through a secret hidden underwater passageway. And we've left the island now. This part here would be set in the deep underwater, similar to the part that I like in the original, except it would be much darker and maybe you'd see some hints of the Kraken. You'd make your way up to the surface slowly and gradually, and then you'd start to see that there's a brigade of ships coming in from the south. These ships are here for you. You've caused enough issues to get the Royal Navy to come in and put a stop to your madness. At this point, a massive storm rolls in, and then we see something, a maelstrom, very similar to the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. You're jumping in and out of ships while they're blowing each other up with cannons, using the swing rope mechanic, going underwater and back up into ships where you're destroying them, letting them on fire. This would be some of the most bouncy gameplay that I would have ever made, where you're flying between these different vessels, quickly changing your game mode from wave to robot to ship to spider to simulate how intense and hectic this entire battle that is going on in the background truly is. And here you've made it out. You're back on the original boat, just sailing freely. And there'd be some sort of ending here, but I hadn't planned that far ahead. Potentially, it would be you walking up to one of the final cannons and lighting the fuse to blow up the final ship as you walk away with all of your gold and jewels. But we'll never know, unfortunately. There was a little bit of extra work that I put into this level that I haven't shown yet. For example, this cool little design for an animation of some fruit rolling over when you use an orb, as well as we also have some unused decoration by Galzo that would probably be used something similar to what I'd want to see in the very deep underwater murky section that comes right after the treasure cave. You can see how much more interesting this level is when it's fully thought out. It arguably could be one of the best themed levels ever made if it had been done like this in the first place. The process of building this revamped version of Captain's Voyage also has a special place in my heart for a completely unrelated reason. It was the last time that I ever spoke to a good old friend. Check your GD messages. I remembered the 47 in the name, you know? Hey, it is the real one. Okay, cool. That's what I thought. Nice, dude. Welcome back, Mishi. That stream that Michigan stopped by was the last time that I ever saw him. And in that stream, I gave him the level. And he put down 3 sets of triple spikes, which are officially the last ones ever placed in Geometry Dash. About 2 to 3 months later, in March of 2021, Michigan sadly passed away. This was something that really impacted the entire community, and as somebody who looked up to him in terms of both the dedication to this game and the community, as well as his talent and ability to build levels that I always enjoyed, I don't really know what to do with these triple spikes and whether or not I should use them for anything. But part of me wants to, just to honor the player that I looked up to. Now, I didn't mean to ruin your mood, and I originally wasn't going to even include this in the video, but I thought it was something that was a really important piece of history for the remake that I've been talking about. Now let's go back to talking about the original Captain's Voyage, and the final thing that I want to touch on. While I roast this level and say that it is extremely poorly made, and the gameplay is unfun, and it is a terrible level, which it is, there is one good thing that actually came out of it, and that was the jaw. The jaw, if you don't know, is a symbol of my channel. It is one of the biggest emotes, and it's a meme in my community, as well as the rest of GD. You can see it featured in levels such as Digital Descent, Phantom's Manor, many of my levels, and a lot of other levels that are online. If you ever see this dumb shark, you should know that that's from Captain's Voyage, the worst level ever made. Viprin, you may have kicked me out of the sequel to my own mega collab, but the jaw will always be there to take my place. Also, the jaw is really big, and I made a auto level based around it, which is my only non-demon featured level. It's an auto level, a rickroll of the jaw, and actually jaw rolled a bunch of streamers such as Aeon Air and Juniper, got them to play this and rickrolled them in GD. That was super fun when we did that. And to make it even better, the creator of Geometry Dash, RobTop Games, has used the jaw emote in my stream, which is probably one of the coolest things that has ever happened. Because of the huge impact that the jaw has had on my community, we've developed a plethora of adaptations of it, different versions of it. You have Minecraft jaws, you have balloon jaws, you have ghost jaws, witch jaws, you have bee jaws, you have hazmat jaw. The number of jaws are endless, and if you're interested in drinking out of a jaw mug, you can check my Streamlabs link in the description where you can purchase one. Woo! As you can see, Captain's Voyage was the reason for everything going wrong. Every single garbage level that has come out came out since the release of this level, putting less effort into the decoration and into the gameplay than ever before, because we know deep down it will still get featured. There's only one thing to do to correct the course of action to make sure that our timeline is fixed. So let's do it. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hid this cube that is on the screen right now. I hid it in the video somewhere. If you put the timestamp in the comments, I will pin and heart the first person to figure out where it was. I want to thank you all for watching and see you on the next one. Peace!